to re-examine your campaign rhetoric, how much you love the environment. I saw an environmental candidate forum, I actually saw a candidate, saw several, talking about how much they thought climate change was a significant issue. The number one issue affecting our community is climate change. But when you come and look at what your actions are, you don't really consider it the number one issue. I just want to hold you accountable for your promises. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rosenthal.
Yeah, next speaker is Vivian Scott, followed by Jenny Grimsley, please.
Hello, my name is Vivian Scott. I live at 1826 Patrick Avenue here in Tallahassee, Florida. I'm concerned about the area of Gordon Steels when y'all closed off Meals and Mata Street. I live off Roberts Avenue. I have to come all the way down Roberts Avenue to Stuckey Street, which if you guys have driven on that road, it's dangerous. Trying to come across Stuckey to get across Lake Bradford to go to the Bonds community. And the roundabout you guys built, no. They don't know how to drive the roundabout. So what I do is I take Mill Street, Mott Street to Mill Street. And there is closed off. So now I have to drive on the roundabout. They're afraid of roundabouts. I have one right off of Roberts, right in front of my street. They're dangerous. People don't know how to drive them. You have any accidents on those roundabouts? I have one down by Orange Avenue, but I lived over there, the first street built on Jimmy Road. I seen trucks fall over in a retention pond. I seen people get ran over. Roundabouts, we don't know how about roundabouts. We need red lights, we need stop signs, because they do not know how to drive on roundabouts. And you took a whole neighborhood away, just like I had to leave Eugene Street because the road was coming there. The road never went there. Now the road is going somewhere else. You take out another neighborhood. Enough of taking out our neighborhoods. We got enough roads. Mill Street is a vacant road. There's another road on the other side. Y'all gotta use that road. Why go through a neighborhood? Why does Chief Walker have to park family buses in the middle of a pasture because y'all took his place and he parked his buses? I mean, is that citizen doing right by your citizens in Tallahassee? You know, think about the stuff that you guys are doing. We elected you all to speak for us. In every black neighborhood you go around, you're tearing it down. You did it in Frenchtown. You did it on Stern Street. You did it on Eugenia Street. Not in Morton Steele. I mean, why take away all the black culture? Black people like your neighborhoods. They may be little right houses to you guys with no air conditioning, but they're happy to have those houses. Those are the houses that were about in the 20s, the 30s, when they walked out of slavery. Somebody gave them opportunity to buy a little shotgun house and a piece of little land. They were proud of that. And I have people that still holding on to those little shotgun houses and those little pieces of land. To them, to y'all, that may not mean nothing, but to them, it meant a lot. So think about what you're doing to your citizens in Tallahassee. Think about your black community. Think about us. We don't live in Carolina. We don't live in Southwood. We don't want to live in Carolina and Southwood. We want to live in Bond, and we want to live in Morton Steele. We want to live over Lake Bradford. That's where we want to be. So if you would try to make it nicer for us, instead of tearing down the houses, why the city didn't revamp the houses? The county got a budget. I used to work down with Ms. Jerry and Mr. Sheeson. They had millions of dollars that they went out into the county, revamped houses, bought new houses, built new houses, but the city wanted to tear them down. What's the difference between the city and the county? That's all I want to say. Stop destroying your black neighborhoods.
Thank you, Ms. Scott.
Next speaker is Jenny Grimsley, followed by Mr. Lenoir Bauer.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Jenny Grimsley. I'm a decade, 30. Gosh, I just dropped my address. I just moved there. 3018 Blairstone Court in Tallahassee. I've been a Tallahassee citizen for over 24 years, but I moved here from Baytown, Texas. And the reason I moved to Tallahassee was because we had one live oak in Baytown, Texas. And it's on the shores of Exxon. When I came here 24 years ago as a visitor, the trees here caught my attention, and I wanted to raise a child here and work here and live here, and that's what I've done. And so I want to say too that I spent about 50 hours at the Point and Still site in July. just because I went out there originally just to hear about I heard about the Benton Oak, right? Because there was a petition. And so I went out there to look at it. And of course, the tree was what brought me, but certainly the people that I saw there was what made me stay. I was interested in what was it about that site that made people want to gather there every day at lunchtime and every evening, just to quietly meet and be together. I wanted to understand what that was, why that was, because I felt like it was important. I felt the import of that. So I did quietly sit there and listen for about, like I said, 50 hours for 1 week straight, just listening to people and being among them. And I can tell you stories all day long about why that was important. And I want to say this, as you think about, each one of you, think about your favorite place on the planet, where you were raised, where you have fond memories of growing up, where you were happy, where things happened to you that stay with you even now. That's why people go back there, because that was a safe space. It is a safe space, and it's a historically important living space. People gather there because the shingles was there and the trees were there. It's shaded, it's beautiful, it's safe. Never once did I see patrol cars coming around. Never did I see people doing anything that was illegal or wrong or mean. Everybody was gentle with each other. It was a kind space. And I want to say that that is the reason why it's important. Again, humans are like, all of us are like migrating birds. We go back to where it's safe, where there's a safe space to be. Okay, and we can talk about those kinds of things in sentimental terms. I've heard the word sentimental thrown around a couple of times about the petition, for instance, in which 34,000 people signed up, right?
Thank you, Ms. Mercer, yeah.
Well, let me just say one thing, is that the definition of sentimental is emotion without substance. And there is substance. There is a lot of substance there. So, thank you.
Next speaker is Mr. Lawrence Barber, followed by Dr. Holyfield.
Yeah, I'd like to speak after the workshop.
After the okay. Dr. Holyfield, followed by Barbara Westcott.
Name and address for the record, Dr. Oliver, if you don't mind.
Dr. Howard. The reason black communities are treated this way is because we don't matter. We never have. Going all the way back to slavery, when Leon County was 70% slave in 1860, according to the census. And all that white generational wealth was just passed forward. That's right, white generational wealth. We never talk about that. We never talk about Capital City Bank Group, which has been here forever. And the author law firm that fought to the bitter end, keep the black side of the public schools at least out of Leon High School. Fought to the bitter end. And the Osley law firm is still over the school board. What the hell is going on here? Is that a birthright? But that's not what I'm here to talk about. I'm here to talk about Washington Square. $6.6 million? Really? We gave them $6.6 million through the CRA? That's our tax money. So let me get this right, because it's about the most stupid thing I ever heard of. We gave them $6.6 million to sue us. Think about that. We are being sued with our own money. Now, how stupid is that? $6.6 million. And then y'all talk about all this development and growth. Let me tell you something. More development doesn't mean less poverty. And more growth doesn't mean less poverty either. Y'all think about Tallahassee increasing in the rankings. What rankings? Y'all ever heard of the Alice listing? The amount of money you have to have just to get by? This ain't coming from me, this is coming from United Way, which never has been a great friend of mine. United Way, yeah, we're increasing in the rankings. We're increasing in the Alice rankings. We're now up to 43%. You know what that means? You know what that means? That means that 43% of the households in Leon County are just getting by. And yet, y'all give millions of dollars to rich white people who are already rich. North American Properties, Fairfield, or whatever they call them, $6.6 million so we can get sued with our own money? Really?
Next speaker is Barbara Westcott, followed by
For the record, he did not mention
Hello, everybody. My name is Barbara Westcott. I'm at 520 Middlebrook Circle here in Tallahassee. And thank you so much for letting me be here. And I also want to thank you for all the hard work you do for our community. But I also want to thank Commissioner Diane Williams-Cox for encouraging me to come and speak today. We worked together last night at an event called the Sister Girl Summit. It was an effort spearheaded by Dr. Judy Manville to bring all the women of our community together. It's efforts like this where people unite for a common cause, for a better Tallahassee that are having a real impact in our community. And it's actually only a matter of time for Tallahassee to say #1 city for women. It will happen. But there's another common cause I have been before you all many times to talk about, and that's a shop tally effort. An effort to keep more spending dollars here to build our. And if we do so in a unified effort, we can easily increase community spending by 5%, showing a minimum $5 million investment. It's within our grasp, and it won't even be that hard. We are intentional. Seeking to have my technologies WellCoin developed right here in Tallahassee to help make it pay to shop tally with cashback rewards. Instead of Amazon Prime, it's Tally Prime. It's Tally Prime on steroids. It's like Ebates for Tallahassee. Free to area businesses where citizens can simply download the app or cashback rewards at our Tallahassee, Leon County businesses. We can incentivize and keep more spending here. But to be successful, a shop tally effort needs support and buy-in from our community leadership. If this was possible to do by my own sheer will and desire, it would already be happening. But we need the entire community to push and promote a shop tally effort. As an entrepreneur from and in our community, it's on me to find the right model fit so that OED, the city, and the county can be willing and important partners in this effort. And after discussions with OED and the leadership of chambers and the merchant associations, I've incorporated their feedback into a more accessible model for the public sector involvement in shop tally. What I ask for now is this body to discuss and see how we can make a serious effort to work together to make shop tally a reality for this community. Let's be Tallahassee to piloting homegrown solutions that can make us also a #1 place for business. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Linda Mikowitz, followed by Mr. Jonathan Lammers, who will be the last speaker following that.
Good afternoon. Thank you for being here and your service. I come to you today to speak from the heart about your handling of the cities and counties and blueprints purse strings. So, some money item. It's not too late to stop the damage that's being done right now. Our money is being used to uproot not just trees, but people who gathered every day for generations at then the Pointing Still, also known as the Shingles area. These are people who notice now that the birds don't sing anymore. They stopped last week when the barricades and fencing came. The sawing of the first tree and breaking the branches of one of the shingles oaks began yesterday. It's not too late to stop it. You need a second expert opinion as to the likelihood of preservation of those trees. Did you know that in the city tree ordinance, it designates these Virginia live oaks as the designated city shade tree? The city wants to reduce carbon in the air. The city wants to clean and absorb stormwater. And yet, you're killing these trees, destroying them, when they have been doing these jobs in massive quantities for centuries. Assistant City Manager Wayne Tedder says there are, quote, structural issues, unquote, with the trees. He says that in emails that people sent him. Urban Forester Melinda Moorman is less than sanguine in her recommendations on preservation, even in her amended report of August 5th. But you need to know this. On July 23rd, when we met with the city manager and staff, they were so proud of using their new Picus sonic tomography on the shingles trees. And they told us that the trees were rotted, 80 rotted, 20 good. We were crestfallen. So we went to find some experts. We found Guy Millier of Historic Tree Care in Charlotte, North Carolina. He looked at the sonic tomography. What sonic tomography, you ask? Sonic means sound. Tomography is a 3D picture. When you go to the hospital, they do it with x-rays. With trees, they do it with sound. So he looks at these images and he says, these are 80% good. It's 80-20 reversed the other way. So then he goes to Scott Baker, a Picus expert. Picus is the brand name, the city called. And Scott Baker, the Picus expert, agrees with him. And Guy Millier conferred with Forester Moorman. But the best evidence that these trees are solid is Sam Hand, who's the FAMU tree extension agent, did micro borings with a little, like it looks like a finishing nail, on 4 sides of each of 4 trees.
Time has been quoted.
Okay, and my last sentence is he proclaimed those trees to be solid. And that is why you can't destroy them, as well as the culture of the people who live there. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Final speaker card I have is for Mr. Jonathan Lammers.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being here. I'm sorry to be back again on the same issue, but I feel it's very important that I speak up. I don't think I could live with myself if I didn't come here and repeat what I've said before. Segment 3D, the stormwater pond, Fairview Way. Is it not obvious that you've opened a Pandora's box and made a lot of people really upset with this project? Let's start looking at a policy. It's been mentioned before, I'm going to say it again, about not using public funds for projects that displace people and destroy neighborhoods. It's wrong and shameful to use public funds to displace people and destroy neighborhoods. It's wrong and shameful to cut down the symbols of our city and important natural resources. I keep hearing again and again official responses, and believe me, I see the emails that you sent back to people that get posted online, that the project can be redesigned because of the needed stormwater capacity. Nobody is against cleaning out our lakes and streams and protecting McCullough Springs. You've got 17 acres immediately southwest. It's the former sewage treatment plant. 17 acres. It's bigger than the project site we've got now. It's just been cleared. It's right in the line of the central drainage ditch. It could be reused. There's a completely good alternative. I know there's a lot of bureaucratic inertia on this, but there is an alternative, and you still have a little bit of time left. I've also heard that groups such as McCullough Springs Alliance have supported this project because of its importance for water quality. I think all of you received today a letter from Sean Glenn, the head of the McCullough Springs Alliance, stating emphatically that he is against the project as designed. Emphatically stating he is against the project as designed, and that is the head of the McCullough Springs Alliance. Please check your inboxes, that came to you today. I know when this started, when we first started showing up, we thought it was just a few disgruntled citizens. I know you see it all the time. I get people who come in and they're serial commenters. This is more than just a few people. Our local Facebook group is 1,000 people. We have a petition that has 40,000 signatures, but I assure you at least 8,000 or 9,000 of them are local. There are a lot of people who are really upset, and they are not going to be forgiving about this. They talk about it a lot. So please, I'm asking you to have the courage to alter this project while you still have a few moments left. You do have an alternate site. You can redeem this a little bit. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Mr. Chairman, that's the final speaker card.
Okay, and if it pleases the board, I'll go ahead and let Ben do the presentation, then we'll open it up and we'll have a discussion.
All right, I'll try and be brief, Commissioners. I appreciate your patience during that time. Okay, so just a reminder, of course, this was the workshop that you requested at the time of receiving and accepting a staff report on the proposed fiscal year 20 budget, which occurred at your June IA meeting. Just real briefly, presentation outline, we're going to talk about how we got to this point in time in preparation for fiscal year 2020 and really the advent of Blueprint 2020 all the way through 2040. We're going to talk a little bit about the revenue projections, those being updated, the focus of our agency on leveraging external funds and partnership opportunities, the uses of funds within fiscal year 2020 for both OEV and for infrastructure. We'll talk about capital projects at a high level and really focus in on the Office of Economic Vitality, the 18 existing economic vitality projects that exist, and then also a future leveraging opportunity fund that's been created. And of course, concluding up here quickly and plenty of time for IA discussion. A little bit of background, and I alluded to this moments ago, but this budget proposal that came to you in June and has been recrafted for your workshop item today, this is informed by at least 5 years of prior standing IA board action, really starting immediately upon passage of the referendum back in 2014. We'll talk a little bit about some of those actions that have been taken. It is in close coordination with the city and county, the city manager, county administrator, their executive teams, and the respective county budget office and city budget office as well. Like any budget development process for a fiscal year, it usually begins early in the spring. Same is true with Blueprint. I told you about the meeting we had in June. Of course, you recall that. And for folks in the room, you now have an additional budget workshop here today to do a bit of a deeper dive. And then we're going to culminate in 2 public hearings. The first public hearing on the budget is actually 2 days from now. And as you see, when we drill into the material here, this activates the 18 economic vitality projects that have already been created in advance of 2020 in your Office of Economic Vitality, activates 14 projects of the 27 on the infrastructure side. It prepares you for your bond, which is standing with your direction from a series of meetings. And of course, it maintains your full flexibility to lever outside funding for these projects, to seek new partnership opportunities where those are possible, examples being, of course, the airport gateway is one good example, and then, of course, to engage with the citizenry, your stakeholders, and this process moving forward. So real high level, I know you've all seen this, but back in 2017, there was a couple of very key meetings on the infrastructure side. First one was in February of that year. We brought forward a recommendation for the process to begin the prioritization. That was blessed by the IA board, and staff conducted work for 6 months and brought back the results of that proposed prioritization. Those were accepted by the IA board. We then, as staff, immediately turned with the prioritization in hand to say, okay, what is the funding plan to implement these projects over the course of the 20 years? And so that was brought back to you in June of 2018. That is the point in time where you identified $100 billion on the infrastructure side for bonding, $20 million on the OEV side for the bonding of the convention center, and really your fiscal year 19 budget, which we are in right now, and the proposed fiscal year 20 budget are predicated upon all of these actions. At the same time, with the new Office of Economic Vitality, as you may recall, we had a strategic planning process that created the first strategic plan for economic vitality, and then the targeted industry study. You see the dates. And again, all of the goals and objectives and metrics that are outlined in those documents correspond to the programs that are created, the incentives that are offered, and the jobs that we seek to create as we strengthen the economy through the work of OEV. Blueprint implementation and funding schedule, I think I hit this already, so I'm gonna pass by it. But again, a lot of this meat was in June of 2018, and much of all that you see today in these budget documents are predicated upon those those IA actions. Already spoke to some of the key documents on OEV. These are the sort of overarching documents that inform the program of work and the program of work and the work that we do tie back to these documents. Okay, so for the first time since 2014, and as is reflected in your workshop material, also in a table in your workshop packet, but called out on the board here, are updated revenue estimates for your sales tax allocations. At a high level, Commissioners, and it's laid out in the item itself, you have a conservative estimation. It's based on recent actuals. Sales taxes have been performing well as the economy has been performing well. I will tell you that these estimates were, of course, generated, as I noted before, in close consultation with the IMC, with the county and city budget offices. They align with those revenue projections, so there's commonality here at the local level. But you can see clearly with the breakdown for the new Blueprint 2020 what you can anticipate based upon today's knowledge to be generated over the next 20 years, both from Blueprint infrastructure, from the 12% for the Office of Economic Vitality, what the 10% respectively for the City of Tallahassee and Leon County will generate, and the additional 2% for the county's LIFE program. A high level, the first 2 years moving forward, we're estimating at 3%. Years 3, 4, and 5, estimated growth at 2%. And then for years 6 through 20, 1.5%. That certainly should accommodate the ebb and flow of the economy that we would anticipate over the course of that entire time frame. Funding sources here, just highlight a couple of things. You can see the sources of revenue for both the infrastructure side and for the OEV side. Some highlights. You can see the $100 million within the next 5 years for bond funding on the infrastructure side. You can see the $20 million in bond funding on the OEV side. You can see grant funding. This underscores when we speak to the priority of leveraging external dollars, we are constantly seeking grants at state, regional, federal levels to bring back and maximize the output for the dollars and the priorities of Blueprint. You can also see the MWSB split as reflected as revenue from MWSB city county funding. Historically, in recent history, I should say, once OEV gained the conjoined office for MWSB for the city and the county, that's been split evenly 50-50. Moving forward into the new Blueprint 2020 tax, it'll be a third, a third, a third. And that reflects what we anticipate to receive from the city and county. Agency funding uses. Here, highlight to me of this table is the cost of debt. So you can see clearly what the debt service on the $100 million should cost, even given the great capacity that you have in the intergovernmental agency, the A+ bond rating that we have. You can see that pulling down $100 million in a bond will take $174 million anticipated to repay. You can also see what it will cost in debt service on the OEV side to repay the $20 million for the convention center, just shy of $28 million. And that's all laid out there. And you can also see very clearly what the blend is for operating expenses, both for infrastructure, what that percentage is, what the percentage is for the Office of Economic Vitality, and what is available for capital projects. And we'll talk some more about that moving forward as well. Funding uses for Blueprint. What this really shows is you've got 14 projects totaling just over $27 million in fiscal year 2020 for capital projects. Attachment 7 to your workshop materials has a breakdown by each of the 14. We just give you the aggregate, but you've got 14 active projects there. Of course, this follows along with the IA-approved direction back in June of 2018 for your implementation plan, and we note that when we talk about bonding, this is the next step in 5 years and an expenditure and an infusion, if you will, of over $250 million for 18 projects of Blueprint to be activated in our community. OEV, similarly, what you can see clearly, also refer you to attachment 1 and attachment 4 of your material. You can see the 18 projects very cleanly laid out. You can see the 2 capital projects that are fully funded, the capital projects being for the convention center and support of the International Airport, City of Tallahassee International Airport. But underscoring all of this, and we'll get into more detail in the next slide, full flexibility to create new programs, modify existing programs, capture new opportunities that will arise in the marketplace, and tie back to the strategic plans and achieve the vision of supporting local businesses and growing our economy and growing good jobs. Here's a little bit more detail. I believe this is Table 7 of your workshop agenda material. You can see clearly in this documentation how now a little bit more detail of how the Office of Economic Vitality will expend its funds. The real highlight here, you can see, again, the bond for the Convention Center in fiscal year 21. You can see the extensive programs that already exist, but the flexibility to modify those programs over time. You can see that we've allocated funding for study updates. We appreciate that as we move into the next 20 years, periodically we will want to retest our targeted industry, our strategic plan, and our disparity study will be, that's a legal requirement ultimately to update that as well. But the thing that jumps off the page, I think, the most on this slide, Commissioners, is the Future Opportunity Leveraging Fund. That really is, as it moves forward, and as you see here, in the first 5 years, nearly $6.5 million we believe will be available for leveraging future opportunities that may arise. So putting it in simple language, we know that we have committed to support a new incubator at Innovation Park, for example. Our portion of that will be $2.5 million if they are successful, and we believe that they will be. This would be the revenue source that we could tap into when that is successful, given whatever fiscal year it occurs in. Another example, the next Danfoss, we're focusing on magnetic technologies and research and getting the next great project. As those projects move forward, you're talking about new funds that need to be reallocated within the targeted business program or as a QTI match, and that Future Opportunity Leveraging Fund is that resource that you can utilize. You look at Table 1, you'll see that about $39 million is anticipated in that fund over the course of the full 20 years. And we anticipate that there will be a lot of give and take there, but this is the structure for that flexibility. All right, so in conclusion, I think I've hit all of these points at this point in time. This is building upon the clear direction that you have. We certainly are here to answer any questions that you have about your proposed fiscal year 20, about the steps that have gotten us to this point, about the next 5 years, and certainly the next 20 years as well. We'd like to thank the folks within the city and county teams that have assisted during this robust development process. And really, bottom line, we will continue to report back at every single meeting. I would say quarterly meeting, but I believe you'll have a agenda item in your next IA meeting packet recommending, as we're getting a little bit busier with the beginning of fiscal year 2020 coming online, to go up from 4 to 6 meetings a year. So we'll be reporting back, if you approve that, at each of those 6 meetings moving forward, and always scanning the marketplace to achieve our best outcomes. You have a little bit more detail here on what are the next steps for this budget, the next 2 public hearing dates, and of course it'll be back to you on your September 5th meeting. Mr. Chairman, last comment, you had mentioned there was also direction in June to bring back an agenda item talking about the Fairgrounds project and the Northeast Park project specifically. That is not part of the material today. That will be a standalone agenda item on September the 5th, so I wanted the board to be aware of that as well. Staff's recommendation is to accept the report, but I want to yield to you, Mr. Chairman, and the commissioners, and answer any questions that you may have.
Move staff recommendation.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Commissioner Dozier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to acknowledge first that I am really thrilled, Mr. Mayor, City Commission, that you've called a meeting for today, and we're getting some resolution on Washington Square. So thank you for your staff working through that, and I respect the need to have that meeting, and they knew you were all in town because of this meeting, I'm sure, so that made it for a convenient time to schedule. I wanted to say that first because we're now looking at 45 minutes for a workshop discussion on something that I think in briefing we were told, and this is not on you, Ben, necessarily, but that we could really have a more robust, open discussion today, and I was looking forward to hearing what you all thought outside of a regular meeting, because, as we've also seen today, we don't have to ask for citizen engagement right now. Dozens of issues just came up that all of us would probably want to engage on and respond to. So thank you all for being here. As the chairman said, we got a limited time, and I think we need to focus on that at our September 5th meeting. So with that framing, I wanted to mention that because I do think this material could generate a lot of discussion, but I want to focus on two questions for our staff and really focus mostly on OEV at this point. The blueprint infrastructure, I think, as Ben said, we have done a lot of work on that over the years, and I think we're going to be able to get back into that in September and after. So first, and this could go to Ben or Christina, the updated sales tax revenue. This is the first time since 2014 that we have had a number that wasn't 90 million. As recently as March, the Democrat printed 90 million as the estimated revenue. So on one side, this is exceptional. On the other side, I am confused. In this agenda item, we have reference to 129 million for OEV revenue, 130 million, 161 million, and 163 million. I think I've got an understanding of the different tables where that comes from. And I could give you page numbers because I had to track it. And we did talk through this yesterday, but in an effort to understand where we are so we know where we're going, what we've got to work with, we could answer public's questions. To me, I would really love to understand first where those numbers are and encourage us to get one streamlined way of presenting this information in the future. Because if we are confused at the table, no doubt people who aren't sitting here every day aren't going to be able to see the distinction. So, Mr. Chair, I do have a second question, but I'd love to...
Take them one by one?
Yes,
That's fine,
put that
yeah.
on the table first. And
Ben
even
or-
if there was other discussion, I'm open
Christina, I'll
to...
let you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Commissioner. And I think completely understanding the benefit of having one document for both the infrastructure and the OEV side that can get into great detail about revenue projections, the update to the, ma'am?
I'm so sorry, Ben. Those four numbers were only in the material about OEV. So just so we eliminate any other confusion, do you mind, and because of the time constraints we have today, do you mind focusing on the revenue projections for OEV and why we have those four different numbers in the item?
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, I will attempt to do so.
Thank you.
I'm going to pull you to two tables, and then maybe we'll find the other numbers that you refer to. But a great deal of work has been done since June to come up with one document that reflects the updated revenue estimates, that breaks it down by category cleanly, and I'm directing you to attachment 1 as being that document. You've got 3 segments. You've got clear notations that speak to each of the different categories of programs. You've got the breakdown by, let's just start at the top. You can see clearly what the growth rate is in each of the various years. And we can have a conversation of, is it too aggressive, is it not too aggressive? But then you can see what that sums up to. And then you can see what the breakdown is for OEV, for the LIFE program, for the city share, for the county share, for the infrastructure share. It's 66%. That correlates and corresponds then to the sources of funds Okay, so beyond, if you will, the sales tax revenue. The sales tax revenues are not the only source of revenues for either the infrastructure side or the OEV side. There are grants, and that if you go into sort of the orange section below, you get into other, known grants, known federal, known state, known local, transfers in from other funds. You have SIB loan funding, you have bond funding, and an appreciation and acknowledgement of the bond funding as well. And then that also is the case for the Office of Economic Vitality. Not at the same scale, admittedly, as infrastructure, but you do see very clearly the 129, and I'm looking at specifically row 26 as being the money that we anticipate the 12% will generate.
Ben, do you mind if Mr. Chair, can I stop you right there? Again, respecting our time constraints. I would love for you to go into a lot of detail here. If my colleagues want to go through the whole table, absolutely.
I think he's doing that, but go ahead. Yeah.
But simply, let me get a little more specific here. So just in that section, on line 26, you've got 129 million just above for sales tax revenue. That probably explains why we see 129 million and 130 million referenced, because you rounded up within the agenda material. Is that correct?
Ma'am, I got to be honest,
Okay.
I don't know of the 130 rounded up. Take
all
you
right.
at your word, but
I don't need to belabor this, but this was exceptionally confusing. We asked for a budget workshop, so it was confusing. So I'm just going to be a little more direct. We don't have to go into the analysis. So on page 5, there is 131 or 130 million reference for OEV sales tax revenue. So I see that, then I see 129, 800,000 later. I bet we rounded up. We then see 161 million in our briefing discussion yesterday as the total revenue. That includes grants, it includes other things, fair point. There is other revenue that comes in. However, we are counting bond, what we receive from the bond as revenue and what we spend on the bond as expenditures, and that's not clear. We're not taking in 161 million. You all said that yesterday, because part of that is debt service. So bringing this to a close, I don't think we're going to get very far with going through line by line, although if my colleagues want to do that, let's do it. We can save it for another time. Really, I was so confused about these various numbers. I don't think this helps get us to the next round of questions, which was really my goal here. So as the maker of the motion at the last meeting, but I want to say I appreciate everyone at the table. This was unanimous support for getting a workshop today. So that was fantastic. Thank you all. I think we do need time to dig into this. So the second question I had, Mr. Chair, I'll leave this here and get out of the weeds on the budget table, is that we need to know what we've got now and what we've got in the future, and a clear vision of that to know what our goals are and if we're meeting those goals. In this document, there is a lot of ways that we can see that staff has met the requirements of our current IA agreement and policies. Absolutely. Budget hearings, everything else, you're meeting how we've done it in the past. My concern is we have this is not blueprint of the past. We have OEV and we have blueprint, and we're starting a 2020 tax. You've done it well in the past. This is gold standard. My question is, what do we do in the future? Does the gold standard of the past meet our needs in the future? And because the numbers are so confusing, I thought it would help me to have this discussion and help all of us. So first, the numbers are still confusing. Second, we have a great strategic plan that's in effect 3 years come this October. I would like to know what the plan is now going forward to reflect on that strategic plan, to update it. I am thrilled by the county administrator establishing a county strategic plan years ago. I am thrilled that the city is going to be considering this. Long overdue, and thank you all for moving so quickly in the last 6-8 months. I am curious how we're doing that here, because in the interest of time, we don't have time to answer all those questions, and that may be a way to help us reflect on that and get some clarity. So, Christina, perhaps you can get into that conversation about the strategic plan?
Yes,
Or Ben?
we trace all of our work that we do, Commissioner, back to our strategic plan and our targeted industries. When we look at the programs that we have developed in our business recruitment efforts and our recruitments with our business development opportunities within the community, that we make sure that everything can go back to the strategic plan and the targeted industry. And we endeavor to do that when we bring an agenda item to you, that it's all traced back to that. And we will continue to do that moving forward with our items that come before you.
Phenomenal up to this point. But you describe, rightly so, this fantastic strategic plan that got us started as a living document. How are we going to keep it as a living document? What are we going to do going forward? Typically, we're going to review it after 3 or 5 years or every other year at the county side. What is your plan going forward?
Absolutely. We, with the passage of this budget moving into the next year, our team will be taking a look at the strategic plan, reviewing where our status is, and bringing forth an update for you in February, at your February meeting.
So that is a staff review of the plan and suggestions to update. Will we have an opportunity for this board to discuss a strategic plan as we do, say, in a county workshop every other year?
If that is the will of the board, yes.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, that's good for me. I'm sorry, Christine, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, we do add to the strategic plan and the workflow after each one of our meetings. For example, with the passage of the disparity study, those recommendations and those policy updates are incorporated forward as part of that work plan too. So it is something that we update regularly as well.
Thank you. Mr. Chair.
Yeah, Commissioner Williams-Cox.
Let me just say thank you all for this, for an outstanding job. I will say that today I'm a bit visually impaired. That's not your fault. But I'm having trouble seeing this material and what's on the screen. What I've asked for, not with every group we've met with, is that whatever presentation that you're doing, can we also have a copy of it here so that we can follow? Because what you've done is you've taken these words and these numbers somehow and you put it in a presentation. So now I'm trying to figure out where and how to get to tie to that, where I really need to be listening. So if you could just help me by doing that in the future so that I have it here at my desktop, I have it here. Or if it's ready at the time that the agenda item comes out, which takes me to my next issue, is that for some reason, I'm not exactly sure why, these things come out so late. And then there's not time to establish briefings. Now, I appreciate you for being willing to meet with me on Sunday, but I was just too tired to meet with you on Sunday about this. And so in the future, because all of us I'm sure would like a briefing, because I've heard Commissioner Dozier speak about her briefing, some things that I wouldn't have picked up on in my reading of this that would have been quite helpful. So in the future, going forward, I would appreciate if we try really hard to get those briefings scheduled. I was already at a conference, League of Cities conference, when I got the call about a briefing, and Monday was not available, which was the only time I had available. So I hope that we can do that better. And my final thing is that this is a whole lot of money. I want to make sure that our community understands exactly where this money is going and how they will see it on the street. Now, infrastructure-wise, I know that they'll see maybe some brick and mortar, some sidewalks, some streets, but in the OEV area, if I'm a small business owner, how can I get money from OEV to help me do what I need to do? I know that there are incentives to attract businesses to come to communities, but what about the businesses already in the community who needs a hand up to try to get their business standing up instead of having to go somewhere to try to do some strange things to keep their business going? I've seen some examples, but we need more so that folks will know when we come back in the future and ask them for more money, we'll be able to point to exactly how and where these things are in their community. And they need to be able to go on, it needs to be read easy, 8th grade level, to be able to go out and see it somewhere or have it printed and given to them so that when we do go out to run for office again, we can say, these are the things that we did and make sure that they understand what it is that we did. So I'm unready because this feels to me like it's a rush. I've been rushed to try to be ready for today, and I don't like that feeling. And a motion has already been made, and it's already been seconded. So to try to stop the apple cart at this point because there's a CAC meeting in 2 days, it's a rush. And I don't like being rushed on important details and things like this. Thank you.
Good. I'll just weigh in real quick. Good comment, but remember, this wasn't a scheduled meeting. So for a lot of us that had travel schedules and stuff, this was dropped in, hadn't been scheduled for months in advance like the typical IA meeting. So, because I ran into the same thing, and I'd like to say this is an eye test, some of the charts that we've got here. So, and I think the plan is that we go to 6 meetings, if I'm not mistaken.
That is correct.
From 4 in an effort not only to meet Commissioner Doe, we can get into this in a little bit more meat going forward because we'll have a little bit more time to get through it. So,
I certainly don't want to stand in the way of Commissioner comments. I've got clarity before I forget, but I can forget it and come back to it later.
I want to mention one more thing I forgot. There was a letter submitted back on June 12th by Mr. Barber, and I know he's slated to speak. I'd hope that he spoke about it before we did our comments. But I want to find out, did he get a response to his letter regarding Blueprint Intergovernmental Agency fiscal year 2020 operating budget? Again, I see that you all received it. You received this letter. You were CC'd, all of you. Ken, Wayne, Ben, Autumn, Christina, and is that Trez?
Trez, yes.
Is this one you're familiar with?
Oh, I'm familiar with Mr. Barber, yes, ma'am.
Okay, are you familiar with this letter?
Yes, ma'am.
No, I watch Perry Mason. Are you familiar with this letter?
I am.
Have you responded to this letter?
No, I have not responded to the letter.
Okay.
However, I look closely at the letter, and it has helped inform the work that we do as we prepare for you, who we serve.
So it's in here?
Yeah. And in fact, going off memory, which is dangerous, but we are preparing an agenda item, and actually, Commissioner Matlow, you had a question earlier offline, and this is part of the answer that was provided to you. What we're doing to identify new microloan opportunities. Mm-hmm. We are preparing an agenda item for your September 5th meeting that will go into some great detail about some opportunities that we've scanned the marketplace where we can utilize, we believe, $200,000 of our money to lever $800,000 of federal money with regional partners so that there would be $1 million in money for microloan. I don't want to get the cart before the horse on that, but I will tell you that that line item is included in the draft budget that's reflected before you today, and you'll have a full standalone agenda on that material. No, we listen. I've met with, I don't want to just stop with Mr. Barber. We've met a few times with Mr. Sims, listened to him. That's you. Ms. Westcott, we've been meeting with off and on repeatedly, and we will continue to do so. We, commissioners, and just sort of, and really to your comments, Commissioner Williams-Cox, we're proud to serve as that hub, as that one-stop shop, constantly creating, reviewing, identifying programmatic opportunities that we can bring forward to the IA, that we can create application documentation that is very simple and easy to understand with a menu, if you will, of different types of opportunities that individual business owners, whether they be coming in from another location, whether they be homegrown here, could potentially fit. Each one of those rows, and I would respectfully, I would guide you, if you would, to attachment number 4, you get some really substantial detail of what each of these rows and categories are. This is a 5-year look. It plays back to the larger attachment that we spoke of earlier, but the money does tie together. What you're able to see here clearly from a planning perspective and from planning purposes is acknowledging that you do have a series of living documents, the strategic plan, the targeted industry study, acknowledging that we do have the opportunity and we are planning to update those documents continuously. We are constantly looking for new programmatic opportunities to do what? To grow our economy, to create new jobs at each level of the strata in all of our various communities. We constantly bring those forward to the IA. What we were trying to do in attachment 1, which is the larger one, which is a bit of an eye test, as you noted correctly, was to lay out very clearly when the questions are asked how much money is available over 20 years within the 12% for new and emerging opportunities that may arise. This lays out very plainly, we believe, based on today's data, I won't round up, $39,986,840. We
About
believe,
130.
and we stand by that.
That's about 130. You round up, but anyway.
I will not round up again, sir. But this really lays out very, very plainly what the program categories are, what the fungibility and flexibility is, and how we utilize this opportunity to tie to the strategic plan. We lay out funds in the years moving forward to update those strategic plans, and this is constantly engaged with the IA board at each of our meetings.
Commissioner Williams-Cox, you get your questions answered? You good with it?
I think so.
Okay, all right. Commissioner Lindley?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, sometimes I think the public thinks that OEV is a giant global bank instead of merely having 12% of the sales tax money that the citizens voted on. Only 12%. And 18 programs, some of those which may be well of interest to the individuals who are wanting a piece of this, and understandably so. I also hear from our discussion earlier that people think the Community Redevelopment Agency and Blueprint are somehow all of one. CRA, as you all know, Frenchtown and Downtown are very separate revenue sources from within those districts. So that money is completely separate, and you all in the city are lucky enough to be able to evaluate where that money goes. Also, the city and the county each have 10% of these funds that we can individually, as boards, review and look at when people come to us. So not everything goes through OEV, and not everything goes through the remaining infrastructure money. I hope I'm not being too simple about this, but I sometimes feel like there's so much confusion about where all of this money goes and how it's decided, and it's really decided in quite different pots of money in different ways, and you have a lot of authority as a city commissioner over your 10%, as well as over the Blueprint infrastructure, the bricks and mortar and the roads, trees. So there are just so many sources of, or so many ways to evaluate this. But mostly I always feel like poor OEV is thought to be the source of all growth in this community and all funds to underwrite. We do get grants, we do leverage. That's very important. That adds to what our sales tax money is. So just to try to be a little bit clearer on this, it's actually pretty simple to break it down in the ways where the money comes from and what is specifically going to, governed in accordance with the 3 years of work that our sales tax committee went through, having many, many public hearings, and the work that we have been doing for several years on this board. So I am thrilled to see the increases and so forth so far. But in terms of revenue, I am concerned with the global discussion about recessions and how does Blueprint monitor these things. We would certainly be affected somewhat, I would assume, through sales tax revenue. And do we have a backstop, a plan that looks not for just a glowing going forward, as we've been fortunate enough to do in the last few years, but when do we put the brakes on? How do we know? Are we overseeing this? Or are our financial folks keeping a close eye on the potential for recession?
Absolutely. The communication between your staff leadership at Place, Blueprint, OEV, close collaboration with the IMC, with executive leadership of city and county, the budget offices of city and county, Scott Ross, Robert Wiggin, for example. This is something that is tracked every month the data comes out. It will be reported upon if there is I think, underscoring your question, if there is a dramatic shift in the economy, something drastic that happens, that would be brought forward out of cycle. But going forward, every year, this is revisited during the budget development process as you do your forthcoming fiscal year budget and your forthcoming 5-year CIP. So we're constantly evaluating trends. We're constantly bringing forward resolutions and options in real time as those trends emerge. And at the same time, we're constantly scanning the marketplace for new leverage dollars, particularly for the regional mobility and gateway projects, those large projects. And with great success, by the way. As everyone at this table knows, we have great success in leveraging state and federal dollars for Blueprint priority projects. Best example being the #1 ranked Blueprint 2020 project, which is Capitol Circle Southwest, which is a great example of how we've been successful in leveraging state dollars for that last segment, if you will, of Capitol Circle, as it's borne out in the DOT 5-year work plan. But no, to answer your question, we look at this data constantly. It is the main driving revenue source for Blueprint IA. We do that in close partnership, and that is reported back to you twice a year, specifically, and more frequently as need be.
It's also worth, we faced this with the last round of Blueprint too, because, we rode through the recession, and so we had to adjust as we went through, and that's kind of part of the process. It goes up, it's going to go down. Nobody can predict the future.
I mean, I'm usually a glass half full person, but lately I haven't been feeling that way so much. So I just want to be sure some other grim reapers are around thinking about this stuff. Thank you.
Did that answer your question? Okay. Commissioner Bryant.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have several questions, but I'm going to go over to the operating budget. And I'll ask the other questions later. First, let me acknowledge that this is, that the report that we have does provide at least enough information for me as a new person to ask some questions. So thank you for your work. I would like to know, I was going to ask the question you just asked about the future, but I think that as we look at preparing or updating our strategic plan, by then we should have some trends and conditions that will give us some hint about where we're going. Because I would hate to have 5, 10 projects that are in limbo in the midst of a recession because we didn't plan accordingly. I'd rather finish 3 of them, and I'm just using that rhetorically, rather than having 10 and we're in a recession and limited funds. But you said you're doing that year to year, so fine. Let me go to the operating budget and just ask a couple questions. I do know that a lot of this was agreed upon starting maybe 5 years ago or more, and we're operating within the paradigm of where we are. But as we move forward into the next 5 years with this funding, and I asked this yesterday, and I was happy to know that we can still submit, persons, companies, groups can still submit a request to use funds. I think that was on line 50-something for OEV.
Attachment 1.
Yeah. So I also understand that as we go through the year and funds are not expended because projects do not actually materialize in the way that it has been identified that they would, that those funds also become available. So I'm sure somewhere in here it probably told me how I would access those funds or where, how I would know they exist, and how I could communicate that to people who want to access those funds, if that makes any sense.
Yes, ma'am.
And then I'll let you answer that first.
Well, I think the answer is absolutely yes to your question. Attachment 1, and I think it's line 53, speaks to the question about the grants and programs. And the 18 economic vitality programs come in various shapes and sizes, right? So they cover everything from incentive projects, traditional economic development projects. Okay, we're recruiting a company. They're going to create X number of jobs at Y wages, and so they qualify for state incentives like the QTI program, and they may qualify for the targeted business program. And so there's rows or programs, if you will, that they would qualify for. But what, for example, and so that's one category of people in the marketplace that would have an interest in OEV and coming to the one-stop shop hub. But then there are others. There might be emerging businesses in the opportunity zone. And so we created, so that we're not getting one-offs with everyone coming in with their own unique ask, we as staff elevate to you through the EVLC programs, new programs that can capture opportunities for a multitude of people. The Urban Vitality Job Tax Credit Program is an example of that. Yeah.
Yes.
Question was, I think, how do you get that information to us so we can disseminate it? Is that fair?
Right. I understand that, but how would I tell someone in the community that, look, not necessarily what program didn't make it, but there's another $5 million available? What's that process such that people can be informed?
And there was a process that when we first went about trying to figure out what to do with OEV money, whereby citizens could submit an idea, and then that idea will go through the IMC and a couple more different branches before it came to us. I think what she's trying to say is, is that process still in place, or what is the process?
Yeah, I think Christina.
And I would add to it, is it even realistic to think that we would have money left over for that type of process?
Oh, yes. Go ahead.
Commissioner, I'll use our two programs that we grant out right now, and that is our Workforce Development Grant and our Urban Jobs Program. Through our Workforce Grant, we have we have a grant process that starts this fall to leverage and apply for the $100,000. Upon award, and we put that out through social media, our electronic newsletters, and a news release as well. And we turn to our partners to help promote that as well through direct outreach.
Is that the Elevate Fund?
Yes. And from that point too, if there's any money left over in that pot, we do a second round of funding. For the Urban Jobs Program that you just approved modifications for, we have promotional materials that we will supply to our partners and towards you too, so that you are aware of those programs to refer other businesses.
Mr. Chair, I had a question to clarify, springboarding off of Commissioner Bryant's question. Would that also apply to the Future Opportunity Leveraging Fund? If we get to a point where the IA has not allocated the use of, let's take fiscal year 2020, the $1.05 million there, would that go through the grant process, basically the same line item as 53, or would it be something that IA would determine explicitly?
It would be the IA. We'll use the incubator, Innovation Park Incubator Project. There was an opportunity for them to apply for a grant. They were seeking a match of $2.5 million. Staff analyzed that, brought that to you for consideration, and $2.5 million was pledged for a 40,000 square foot incubator space out at Innovation Park.
Gotcha.
Well, let's take it a step further, too. Same pot, same fiscal year. Let's say a new project materializes next year. Using my magnetic research example, fill in the blank company, Airbus, I don't know.
You had me at magnetic research.
Well, thank you, magnetic research. It comes in and there's a great new incentive program and project in place, but we don't have enough allocated within that row for QTI or TBP. We would bring forward to the Intergovernmental Agency Board a recommendation to shift funds up from that Future Leveraging Opportunity Fund so that you could utilize those. Yeah, as the need may arise.
Right. Thank you. And Commissioner Bryant, thank you for allowing me to jump in there.
Absolutely, because I'm back to my same question. Yeah. What I'm trying to determine is, and I understood what you just told me, but I'm talking about projects where you don't need to add money necessarily, but they didn't spend the money or they did not successfully complete the project, whatever it is, and you pull it back. You say, okay, no longer. You're not meeting your objectives. Where does that money go, and how will people know that it now exists? That's the question I'm trying to better understand.
Understood. There's a number of ways that they would know it exists, that you would know it exists. It would flow back to your Future Opportunity Leveraging Fund, as we go forward year over year. You would see it reflected there. So yes, if QTI projects that were already approved and were allocated in different rows did not come to fruition, then those funds would fall to that future leveraging opportunity fund. They would be reflected in the CAFR document each year. So as you know, you have an audit conducted, independently verifiable. Actually, that's going to be coming to you in September as well. So it would be reflected there, and it would be reflected in the staff updates that you get, honestly, in each of your meetings. They've been quarterly thus far. They'll be every 2 months moving forward. But so there's a series of vehicles where you would know that information.
Okay, I'll yield on that one because it's more important that people who want the money, since I can't get it anyway, and who would want to apply for the money will know that it exists. And I don't think that it's our responsibility, now to go out every quarter or whenever we get the update and say, well, it's additional $5 in category ABC. So I'm trying to understand, is there a structured process that will inform the public about available funding that may be in addition?
I want to ask, Commissioner, that you not yield on that, because that's an important point that you put across. I think you explained where the money goes, but even me sitting here right now, how do they access that money?
Application process. So any program that you put forth has oversight and governance for that. So Christina can talk about, and she did talk about, a couple of the grants, for example. There's an application process. It goes through that. If it's a competitive economic vitality project, it would go up through the competitive projects cabinet reporting back to you. The bottom line to your question is, when you approve it, and you will approve it in every fiscal year budget, and you have already approved the programs, the onus is then on us, on your team, to get the word out into the community through Daryl and the division, MWSB in cases, through all of the various social media and other electronic platforms that we have at OEV, using city communications, using county communications. That is completely upon us, right in line with all of the dollar levels that you've authorized within that fiscal year. We get that out. We seek those people to apply. We communicate with them as the one-stop hub, and then we report that back to you on how those programs are doing over time.
And so maybe to Commissioner Bryant's point, too, that you include us in that correspondence in layperson terms so that we've got walking around knowledge about what's going on.
Right,
All right, let me finish.
Then maybe we need to do a better job of public relations and letting people know when there are opportunities like that. Because you said we seek out the proper people. I don't know who those people are. You probably don't either. But
all right.
I mean,
are you good, Commissioner Bryant?
Yeah, I'll keep my operating budget question.
Okay.
Since we're running out of time.
I know. Well, I want to make sure everybody gets a chance. Commissioner Matlow hasn't had a chance to speak yet. I want to make sure he gets a chance.
First off, I wanted to ask Madam City Attorney, if this meeting runs a little late, are we okay to swear in late as the City Commission to take up the Washington Square matter? If this runs a little later than 3 p.m.?
No.
Yeah. Okay.
Sure. Yeah.
Obviously, if it's us, someone can say it will start immediately
Okay, thank you. A few things here. I agree with some of the confusion in the process of the budgeting and the strategic planning. I think, at least at the city government, we've been working with the city manager. I think we're happy with our budgeting process and our chances to communicate, our feelings and how we want to change. I would ask the city manager and the IMC to just kind of work more closely with Blueprint to kind of structure our processes more similar to what we're familiar with on our respective board. And I think that'll help alleviate some of the conflict and confusion that we've been experiencing. My bigger question, I asked a lot of questions along the OEV line here too, just to find some more clarity, because if members of the board have the answer to this, I don't know what I could tell people in 20 years what we got for $130 million in plain language, like what we're buying, what our return on investment is. And that doesn't mean that there's not good programs in place and we're not, working on good things, but I can't say definitively, this is what we're going to buy with your money. We get the updates about the economic progress of the city. So I asked the question, how do we determine what impact OEV has versus what would have happened anyway? And I appreciate the response, but it essentially was, we're going to illustrate the economic condition in Tallahassee, but how are we comparing that against the nation, against other cities, and really trying to dial in on the impact? If we go and we help a company like Proofa, I would wager they'd get open without us one way or the other, and can we really claim credit for each person we come into contact with versus how much we actually create as an agency? So I would encourage that we just kind of have a deeper conversation about what metrics we're actually using and what return, specifically in numbers and not just the overall economic picture of the city. Secondly, there's been a lot of questions about OEV that I think just comes down to what issues are important to this board. Like individually as board members, I don't think I've ever been asked the question, what should OAV be focused on? And I think there's different opinions here from listening to comments about how people have access to funds and what those programs are. So I think it begs the question to just have a bigger conversation of what this board would like to see out of OAV and what that return would be. I have some other items to discuss, but I'll yield on that point.
Okay. Yeah, Commissioner Dozier, but I want to make sure before we do get done that everybody gets a chance to speak that wants to. So
We have public comments, yeah.
Whenever you get a chance.
yeah, Commissioner Dozier, then Commissioner Maddox.
Mr. Chair, I have an amendment to suggest the motion for an agenda item. I don't mind at all waiting for the rest of the discussion. I just like an opportunity to do that before we break for the city meeting. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Commissioner Maddox.
Quickly, Mr. Chair, I'll be brief. I think to Commissioner Bryant's concern and question, I think you gave some clarity to it, but there's still more clarity could be given to it. I don't think the community at large knows the process. Whether there's a person out there who actually is not on the inside that just hears about this and wants to know how to go about it. And so Commissioner Lindley said it best in the PR of it all, of giving people the opportunity to be able to access it. We don't want to just use it on who we want to use it on. It could be a great idea out there that we just don't know about and don't know about us, that we can marry the two together and come up with something pretty amazing here in Tallahassee. As far as the vision of OEV, there's been a lot of conversation about OEV. And the thing about it is, if you look at the infrastructure projects, there's not many questions there about that, because we know exactly what we're getting. Those things have been voted on. We know exactly where we're going with it. We went through the process, if I'm not mistaken, and Commissioner Dozier, I think you referenced it a couple times, putting together a strategic plan specifically for OEV. Shouldn't that govern or give direction as to what we believe is important for OEV? If there's any misinterpretation of what we think is important, then maybe we need to sit back at this table, review that strategic plan, and then provide some clarity to each one of us on what that actually looks like. I just don't want there to be any kind of miscommunication that we as the policymakers here in Leon County and City of Tallahassee are confused about what the priority is for the 12% that we told our citizens that we knew what we were giving them, what exactly it was going towards. And so to Commissioner Matlow's question of, 10 years or 20 years from now, we spend 130, what have we spent it on? How do we quantify it? What's the matrix for it? The matrix, in my opinion, should be successful completion of the strategic plan that we placed forward before we even had access to the 130. So if we're not aware of it, of what that strategic plan looks like, then maybe we need to do a review of it. But it's there. It's there. There's plans there as to what success should look like in 20 years once we've completely spent every single dollar of the infrastructure sales tax money. Again, I'll leave it at this. We have a very clear indication right now of what infrastructure success looks like, and that's completing every single project that we have on the list. OEV, in my opinion, success looks like completing every single task that we have on our strategic plan. If there's any confusion about what our strategic plan is, we should probably review or update those commissioners who have any confusion on what it looks like. Thank you.
Comments, yeah. Mr. Mayor, any comments?
I'm good.
Commissioner Jackson? Just making a quick round here of people, everybody.
Commissioner Delors,
Yes,
just
sir. Commissioner
very
Richardson,
briefly,
I'm sorry.
20 years ago when we did Blueprint 2000, it was laser focused on infrastructure projects, and we did that well. And so the community 20 years later or thereabouts said, okay, we like what we saw. We're willing to invest another 20 years in additional infrastructure projects, but the recommendation was made this time for the 12% for economic development. But it was totally new. We had never done that before. And I'm not sure that we did as good a job as maybe we should have in giving the community an idea of where we wanted to go with that 12% and what the metrics would be. How would we determine if we were being successful in spending that money? And so I agree with Commissioner Maddox then. That's where we fall back on our strategic plan and what we've, and I guess with so many people being as new as they are, we have not done a workshop where we have briefed them and brought them up to speed being on that strategic plan and what's outlined in that plan and what our metrics will be 10 years from now, 20 years from now. But it's in that strategic plan. And if we need to update it, if those who are new have input, the opportunity should be for them to give that input and we update that strategic plan.
Good comments. It's also worth, and Commissioner Minor, I'll get right to you. We're one of the first counties in the state to do this. And if you remember, this was the squishiest part of the referendum. It was the toughest part because, to your point, everybody understands a road, everybody understands a bridge or those type of things. It's very difficult. Everybody's got a little different version of what it is. So I think it's going to be an ongoing discussion. Commissioner Minor?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When Blueprint formulated the 12%, the economic development section of the renewal of the sales tax dollars, I was elated. I mean, I thought it was a terrific, brilliant idea. And springboarding off of just Commissioner Maddox and Commissioner Richardson said, I would benefit as one of the newer commissioners, a workshop reviewing that strategic plan. For two reasons. Number one, it'd be good for me and the other newer commissioners here, as well as the public, to review the decisions that you all made. But then number two, just as important, it's very important for us to stress that the process is done fairly with full transparency. Over the years, I have heard from citizens throughout town that question or have concern about how fair that process is. Are there people that have a fast track or are able to circumvent the process to get special treatment when applying for those types of dollars? What I'd like to do with part of that workshop is to emphasize that the process is open and transparent and try to address those concerns, which I've not heard lately, but as we start talking about these new sales tax dollars coming in, I have a feeling with the 12% being allocated, we're going to start to hear that a lot. Let's talk about that now and try to address those concerns now.
Good question. Commissioner Williams-Cox.
I wanted to just pile on and how important it is going to be to review that strategic plan, and I'm glad Commissioner Minor mentioned it, not only for us, but for the public as well, because everything that we do, we need to make sure it is transparent, and the public has an opportunity to understand it and be able to tell us what they think so that we can then come to the table and talk about what it is that they think. And I think that every opportunity we have to make sure that the public is aware where things are, how they can review it, and that kind of thing, and make sure, again, I keep saying this but for a reason, make sure it's in plain English so that people can understand it, so that they can speak intelligently about it, and we don't have to spend time trying to translate these things, because everybody's not good with numbers, so we've got to make sure that we say it and present it in a way that they will be able to talk with us and we'll be able to talk with them to get positive feedback to bring. So, and also, I think it's good for the seasoned commissioners as well, Because have you had time to go back and look? Have you had time to go back and cross-reference all these reports to that? So it's good for everybody, not just us newbies, but everybody.
Yeah.
Good comments.
Mr. Chair, I'll go ahead and add to my motion to accept the report, a review, agenda item reviewing the strategic plan.
Commissioner Maddox?
Yes.
I'm sorry. I would fully support that. Do you mind if I make a suggestion for an agenda item for the September meeting? I think it may be able, I know we're coming up fast on it, but it may be able to add in a little bit more to that and schedule a workshop. Do you mind if I?
So you want to amend the motion?
Well, I'll take a listen to.
Wait a minute, I'm sorry.
I'll take a listen to Commissioner. Commissioner Dozier has asked that I listen
Okay.
to her amendment.
So you had an amendment you wanted to add, though.
I do, and it includes the strategic plan review, as Commissioner Maddox was just about to amend. So are we good, Mr. Chair? Do we go around?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we're finishing, but I
Can I
want
get
to.
just clarity on the motion?
Give me a second. Right now, we're just accepting the report. She
Right,
wants
and
to
she wants to
take
make
a
an
whack at her
amendment.
motion.
So wait and see what.
At an amendment.
Sorry. Okay, sorry.
Thank you. We were about to amend the motion, and I just want to take a pause here. I know fully that whether it's Innovation Park or other things, I have taken a deep dive into this stuff, and I often bring too much detail into some of my questions. I just want to own that for a second. I'm trying to figure this stuff out the same as all of us. We have a special role as board members versus our exceptional staff that has to carry out policy directions. We're charged with oversight and policy direction. The discussion that just happened, I have been waiting for years for us to have this discussion. And I want to thank all of you for digging in, staff, but all of the colleagues, because Commissioner Lindley, what you said about really understanding the different pots of money. CRA is different than Blueprint. OEV can't do everything in the world. All of us can articulate that, for sure. But to the discussion, Commissioner Richardson, Maddox, all of it about the strategic plan, we are doing things in economic development in this community that we have never done before. I want to give our staff credit for that, from the target industry sector to, the business recruitment, the numbers you shared with me yesterday, Christine, I'll save that for your report in September, but the revolving loan fund, which you're going to hear about in September, these are exceptional wins for our community. We won an international trip, the ACE bid, with Christina's leadership. Exceptional. But we never stop to say, what is Economic Development 101? We're charged with putting governing and policies forward and our staff to execute. We got to have their back and really know this. So I think the strategic plan was great to get us started. My question earlier on was, is it time to update it? So Commissioner Maddox, the only reason why I stopped you there, I 1,000% support updating the strategic plan. But I think we should ask for a way to do an ongoing review of that strategic plan. How do we look at our policies, make sure we're doing our governance, our due diligence on the economic development side, as well as we've done the infrastructure side for years, with the caveat we can do it better with the public involvement. But I think part of that is because we've been mixing these two subjects in very short meetings. None of us have time, the public doesn't have time to drill down into either one. We've got to give infrastructure its due respect. So, Commissioner Maddox, with that last comment, kind of summarizing this, because I am excited about what we can all do, staff and commissioners together and the mayor, is to have an agenda item that gives us a time for that strategic planning review, as you suggested, and a plan to review the strategic plan at a regular interval over the years, like county does, like city does. Just get us started on setting up that ongoing review to make sure that we are always on top of this.
Can I ask a question for clarity on the motion, just because I know this is going to be, you want to do this in September?
I'm thinking, Mr. Chair, an agenda item in September.
Okay.
That gives us information that we can start to discuss. How do we review the strategic plan, and sets the workshop that Commissioner Maddox mentioned first?
Okay. Ben, you want to weigh in?
Yeah,
It's
thank
just
you,
a
Mr. Chairman.
discussion item
No.
for how we go from here, and so you can hear from us as to what we want at that workshop.
Right.
Understood, Commissioners. Just, and I touched on it earlier, and I think it's probably proper to just reiterate it here. Staff is working on an agenda item for your September
It can
meeting.
be folded into that for the meetings.
Okay, so folded into that, yes.
I'm fine
And
with that.
The anticipation was that one of the, I'm sorry?
I'm sorry. Let me clarify, Ben. Yes, you're going to suggest that we go to more meetings. Commissioner Maddox is amending his motion to include a workshop outside of those 6 meetings that you're about to propose in a couple weeks. Is that correct, Commissioner Maddox?
No. I was going to ask for a workshop or agenda item inside of those meetings. I mean, if we're going to more meetings, why do we need another meeting to discuss?
Right.
We can,
Right.
this needs its time to breathe, for sure. And even in September, I want it to have its time to breathe, and September won't give it its time to breathe. So, I'm willing to have it soon after. Improve the budget.
I am asking for a plan for the next 20 years to start developing that as an ongoing review of the strategic plan.
I think it's valid for staff to come back and say, here's how we continue to update you with the strategic plan. If your ask is, can we dive into the strategic plan in the September meeting, I don't think that's realistic.
No.
And I was not asking.
But I think I think that's going on behind the scenes to a large degree and in our briefings. But I think that certainly they can come back in the meeting in September and say, here's how we touch you regularly with where we're going with strategic plan and make sure it meets everybody's. That would be my,
so,
I don't want to put words in your mouth.
No, and honestly, I have more information on this because the agenda material has not been released yet.
Right.
But the thought was not just to have 2 additional meetings, go from 4 to 6 because there's more work to do.
Yeah.
The thought was to have in those 2 additional meetings, one of them in the spring that could really hone in and focus, do a deep dive on the budget. The second one was to do an additional one in the fall that would do exactly this.
Right.
It would be a deep dive on our strategic plan, on our target industry study, on how we're performing. And so that was baked in, that's honestly baked into the draft item that we've been working on. And so you should see that reflected in that item.
That was now, Commissioner Dozier, you can make a substitute, but that was the intention of my motion, to have one of those meetings, do just that. And I do like the idea of having a point where we take an even deeper dive into the strategic plan and make modifications if necessary, and let's say, 2-3 year of a 5-year plan interval. So I'm fine with that part. I don't quite. That's my intention as well.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair,
so we have a proposed amendment here. I need to get an answer.
Mr. Chair, we are saying the same thing, and this was the same comment, Commissioner Richardson, you made, Commissioner Maddox, all of us were making, is that we want time to understand the plan and to work through it.
Yeah.
If that is already contemplated in the agenda item, that means your goal, Commissioner Maddox?
Yes.
I don't need to amend the motion on that piece.
Yeah.
So we were just confused about that it's not in the, we didn't know it was in the item already, Ben.
Yes,
But I do think the ongoing 3 to 5 year intervals is important.
Yeah.
For this board and for the community.
Yeah.
Like I said, this is so new, y'all, and different than what we've done before. We've got to bring everybody along. I mean, I think we kind of passed it and everybody was excited, but we didn't bring everybody along in terms of what it is we're trying to accomplish and what the metrics will be. And so this is our opportunity to do that now. But
one additional thought, and right where you're going, in addition to looking at the strategic plan, that fall meeting gives us the opportunity, perhaps to your point, Madam Vice Chair, to then look at the programs we have approved and how are they performing? Not who we talked to. No, who have we served? What jobs have they created? What is the return on investment? Program by program, by project, in every single fiscal year. So that at the end of 20 years, we've got 20 years worth of that we can sum, that you can report to the community and you can see very clearly how the performance is doing. Not our performance on aggregate as a community. We monitor that too and do a great job of it. But what has OEV done? What jobs have we helped incentivize with our partners and create? So they could potentially do both of those things.
One question on this, wrap it out, because Commissioner Bryant, you had a good line of questions there, and I appreciate the discussion. it seems like there are three ways. Once we establish a program, OEV has a great way to push out that information and get applicants back. But we also have agenda items that come up, whether we have 4 or 6 meetings, the timing of those agenda items and whether individual board members can request agenda items, that's not a policy we've ever established. And to Commissioner Matlow's point, it looks different than county and city. So I think some clarity on how an innovation park project or a revolving loan fund, microloans, or something gets on the agenda from any one of us, that might be something that helps. But the third piece, and I'm just going to toss this out for future, it's the one-stop shop. Anybody who was at the chamber conference or anything else, I believe we have a one-stop shop more than we ever have before. But Commissioner Bryant, I don't know if a business talks to us at a conference somewhere, if we can say, go to this one page and it will tell you what program to apply for, how to get an agenda item, or how to initiate the incentive discussion. I think we're getting there with the new website. You're going to tell me that probably in the future, Christina, but we don't have that clarity yet. So those 3 areas and the agenda item piece, I think, is something we haven't tackled, to your point.
Okay, good questions. We got a motion, we have a second, and we went back and forth, but I think we got we need one more citizen to be heard. So I'd like to go ahead and deal with the motion if that's okay. All in favor of this motion on the floor has been presented, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Okay.
Mr. Chair, I just want to take a moment just to thank staff for their forward thinking. I mean, they had already
Second
thought
that.
of
Right, it sounds, you're right. Good question,
Yeah.
good line of questions, but it sounds like they had a lot of that already kind of teed up. Good point,
Yeah.
yeah. We do have one citizen to be heard.
Mr. Lenoris Barber, last speaker.
We saved the best for the last.
I will be brief. Kayla Norris Barber, 802 Old Bamage Road. There's been a lot of talk about microloans and revolving loan funds. At your last meeting, I urged you to allocate $500,000 for a microloan fund. And I was pleased to see that there's a line item in this budget. If I can turn your attention to page 19, there's a line item that says ARPC EDA revolving loan fund. But it's a mystery to me. There's no program description, just a line item. Then I was able to discover earlier today that it's an Appalachian Regional Planning Council revolving loan fund. Now, my issue with this is that I think the dollars are insufficient. I think it should be around $500,000. If you compare it to the targeted business program, it's only about 35% of that program, which is basically a giveaway to folks who come into our community to start businesses, when this program may provide loans for us to start businesses in our own community. But here again, this is why people think that OEV in the system is rigged, that it's unfair. So we got $325,000, and we're going to say Appalachian Regional Planning Council gets to administer that program. I know it's contrary to your procurement policies. I think whatever you put in the budget, was $325,000 or $500,000, that it should be competitive. That you say the money is available and let people or organizations who administer loan programs or microloan programs compete for it. And there's no program description. So how do we know this program is designed so that it will benefit folks who really need this loan program? For instance, one thing that I would love to see in any program, and most of those programs will say that if you're a convicted felon, you can't apply for these funds. And what does that do? I mean, I can tell you what it does. For most black men, it eliminates 50% of us. Thank you.
Great, thank you. We've got one more speaker.
One just came in. Last speaker, I think, Michael Rosenthal. He wants to speak in a second.
Name and address for the record, Mr. Rosenthal.
My name is Michael Rosenthal at 4045 Kilmartin Drive. And I'd like to address the economic development and capitalism. There are two faces of capitalism. There's a very good face of capitalism, billions of people lifted out of poverty in the last few years. The other face of capitalism is the creation of the Rust Belt in our Midwest and lives destroyed, an opioid epidemic left in its wake. So these are the two choices we have when we're doing economic development. These two sides of capitalism are best described in Frank Capra's 1946 film, The Best Years of Our Lives. No, It's a Wonderful Life. Excuse me, It's a Wonderful Life by Frank Capra. And it was about George Bailey, a banker. He ran a rinky-dink little savings and loan. He helped his community. His customers were his neighbors and friends. He came into unfortunate circumstances, and my timer's not going. and how much?
2 minutes.
Okay. Unfortunate circumstances, and he didn't see any way out but to kill himself to get insurance money. A guardian angel came and showed him what the world would be like. He realized he would be better off dead. Guardian angel showed him what the world would be like if he was never born. This was a different world. Hundreds of people were died because he happened to save some other man's life who stopped a Japanese Zero crashing in, a kamikaze crashing into a U.S. service ship. He also made Bedford Falls, the town that he lived in, a great town. Kind of like Tallahassee. But if he wasn't born, all those men on that ship would die. The whole town of Bedford Falls changed.
1 minute, sir.
It changed. And it was Pottersville. It looked more like Las Vegas than Tallahassee. People didn't care about each other. People treated people in a horrible fashion. And this is what you're faced with. Do we want to have a nice town like Bedford Falls or Pottersville? And I'm asking you to make it like Bedford Falls. Everybody, if you haven't seen It's a Wonderful Life, watch it. If you have any concerns about your life and not having any meaning in your life, watch this movie. Tallahassee's a great town. Sometimes I think I am in a Twilight Zone episode because everybody I meet here is just so nice. Now, my prior statement might not actually apply to all the politicians I've met, but everybody else, it does apply to.
Time, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rosenthal.
Mr. Chair.
We stand adjourned, I think. Thank you, guys.